This is the Infinite Receiving Podcast, helping conscious leaders tap into a wealth of abundance across all areas of your life and business. I'm Susie Ashworth, and I'll be sharing with you how you can upgrade your reality through quantum transformation, because you are ready for infinite receiving. Hello, gorgeous. You're going to love this episode if you have any interest at all in psychedelics. Tree and I, who actually is only the third person who I've ever invited back onto the podcast twice. I was loving the conversation so much the first time and totally was not complete when we had to end it. That I was like, we need to finish this. So here we are. But this part of the conversation, we go deep into Tree's experience with ayahuasca and mushrooms, what can happen in the dream state, what happens when you're in the psychedelic state. It's a real deep dive that if there's any curiosity at all, you are going to love this show. So as always, I want to know whether it vibed with you. If it did, share it with a friend. And don't forget to tag myself and Tree on social media. Okay, without any further ado, let's get on with the episode. So I am wondering, what did you dream about last night?
Last night, let me try to remember. Okay, it was a very busy dreams last night, but the only thing that I remember was climbing this mountain, and there were loads of sort of hoodoos. So hoodoos are a very specific geographic structures. They look like these peaks, these rounded peaks. And I was climbing those, and there was all these baby goats that were on the edges and on the cliffs. And I was trying to move past the baby goats to get to the top of the hoodoos. And that was it. So that's the only dream I remember from last night.
What the heck do you think that meant?
I don't know. I think when animals appear in dreams, they can be a really good archetype and symbol. And they're very easy to sort of look up and try to interpret because there's lots of information about animals out there. And I know that goats are very steadfast and tenacious and goal orientated. And if you think of astrology, it's Capricorn. It's very hardworking. The goat is trying to reach its goals. So I took the dream to be a little bit connected to that because of the fact that there was also a climbing of a mountain.
Yeah, like be diligent.
So
set your intentions.
Be diligent.
Pick them off one by one.
Yeah, get,
and you will get there.
Yeah, and stop procrastinating. Get to work. So it makes sense because I'm doing a lot of writing lately. So it's like, just keep going. Don't be distracted.
Yeah. I find the writing process, at times it feels like such a joy. And then other times it's like, this is just a pile of shit and no one's ever going to want to read this. It doesn't make sense. Like I pendulum between those two things. I think the thing that gets me through, or at least got me through the writing of the last book, was it sounds cliche, but like literally writing for me. Does this chapter make sense for me? Is this chapter helping me right now? And if it is, then it's a tick. And if it's not, I know that I've got off track. And as soon as then I write for me, when I review it, I'm like, oh my God, that's perfect. I'm glad I've reminded myself of this key principle. This is useful.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful to get into a conscious shift when you're writing, because there's a zone you get into, and you want to almost like get to the zone where you're channeling something that feels like it's beyond yourself in a way, or it could be like really deeply connected to your source. I think it's
Yeah.
those zones when you feel you hit your stride and you hit your flow state, and the information that you're delivering, it starts to not only resonate with you, then you realize that, okay, this is good to put out there for other people to
Yeah.
hopefully resonate with as well.
Yeah. It's interesting that you used the word channel because that was the word that was in my mind as you started speaking. And I am curious about the otherworldly piece, the mystical side of you when it comes to psychedelics and your journey with those tools and teachers. So I'm curious, when did you have your first experience with psychedelics?
So psychedelics probably, well, it would have been when I was a teenager. So in the 1980s. So my first experiences with psychedelics would be LSD and psilocybin, which is the magic mushroom. And
Yeah.
my first experiences were, of course, recreational, because as a
Yeah.
teenager you were exploring, and I'm a musician, so music is a really big part of it, and I've always been into psychedelic culture, as in psychedelic music, um, and then obviously rave culture when I hit my later teens, early 20s. And so it would have been LSD and psilocybin. And for me, it felt like psilocybin magic mushrooms, I resonated with a lot more. And this is like a natural plant that grows from
Mm.
the earth. And I felt it suited my personality the most. The first time I tried a magic mushroom, it was quite funny. And I did it very responsibly, because you know how some people will just, eat their first mushroom and they'll be like, hey, nothing's happened. Maybe this
Yeah.
didn't work, so I'll eat 10 more. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, they're clawing at the walls and they're like,
Yeah.
get me out of this. And it's, full on like torture for some. So I was
Yeah.
quite, I guess, smart in the way. And I didn't have any manual or handbook for this. It was just, okay, let's just try one. And it was a really nice introduction, because it felt like that little mushroom taught me a lot. And it wasn't, a heroic dose. So it was enough to get to know the personality of this plant. And the reason why I say personality is because it is like that. It is like the mushroom has a consciousness. It has a little personality type, and it's
Mm.
very mischievous and funny. And
Yes.
I just was laughing. Like, it just brought so much joy to me, and it felt like it really suited my little trickster personality type anyway. And it felt very elfin, and I was like, this is great. And so, um, having had the mushroom, obviously being out in nature was a big part of it. So it was sitting there and watching the clouds and the trees all alive and communicating with each other, and just feeling the boundary dissolving, like everything is together. But it was light enough for me to not be able to, it wasn't laid out on my back like, whoa, taken up into some sort of cosmic realms. It was very much like getting to know the personality of this plant, and also the interconnectivity of nature. So it was really funny, because every time I still had a bunch of the mushrooms like on my counter at home in my kitchen. And so when I had kept passing by them in and out of the house, and roaming around, still underneath the influence of it, every time I walked by the mushrooms that were just there on the counter, I felt like they were like, hey, how you doing? Like they were like they were
Yeah.
talking to me, like, hi. Like, they were like these funny little Smurf like beings, so
Yeah.
it was just cracking me up all the time. So just spent a lot of time rolling around laughing, and it was just really, it was great, really great. And then so it felt like a really light introduction, and it felt like it did get me into a different vantage point. It brought a lot of joy. It it freed up the mind to be able to feel creatively, think creatively as well. And so as I
Mm.
explored more and more with psychedelics, and of course I was really into the rave scene from 1990 to 95, I always had a pocket full of magic mushrooms with me. And of course, at that time, a lot of kids were experimenting with other mind altering substances, MDMA and ecstasy. This is when ecstasy first, sort of came out onto the scene. And also that was absolutely boundary dissolving. But I always found that my go-to were the mushrooms in terms of mind expansion, more than LSD, to be honest. I've had my experience with LSD, but mushrooms have always followed me through my whole life. I feel like their personality suits mine. We get along. And of
What
course, as I
was
move
the
forward, I realize, there's therapeutic angles to psychedelics. Obviously, it's not just recreational.
what was the difference in your experience back in the day between the mushrooms, which felt more resonant, and LSD? What was the contrast for you?
The contrast is with the mushrooms. It feels, to me, it really felt nature based, and you do feel more connected to nature. And although with LSD, you do get a sense of that too. Um, it felt more alien. Like it felt more like it has a different personality. I felt like I was thinking a lot more with LSD. So its personality it felt like less nature based and more extraterrestrial. Maybe that's the best way I can
Mm.
explain it. It felt less organic.
Did you have any negative experiences back then with LSD or mushrooms?
I've never had negative experiences with psychedelic substances. I've never been caught
Interesting.
in a spin of a bad trip. I've never done that, and I think it's because I've never overdone it. I've never done the like taking a massive dose in the wrong setting. Like a lot of people I've talked to and guide through psychedelic integration, people who've had the bad trips. It usually is because they're in the wrong setting. They've done way too many hits of acid or ate way too many magic mushrooms, and they're in a social situation. They're at a party, everyone's melting and turning into like flying monkeys and crazy like demons and that sort of thing. But so the set and setting is a really important part of having a good psychedelic experience. And I feel like I've never been in a setting where it's been too much. I've always tried to be in nature with a lot of my settings, and music's a big part of it too. So I've always liked to be, music playing. It helps to enhance the experience as well. So I've never had a bad trip with mushrooms or LSD. I've had interesting trips where it could have gone weird, and the reason why it could have gone weird because of other people in the room. Because
Yeah.
things are getting strange. Like, I had experiences where I've been on like I decided to eat magic mushrooms on a Greyhound bus, traveling through the heartland of America, and then like weird people on the bus of the Greyhound bus, sitting next to me and having conversations. And I'm like, wow, including like an ex-convict who just got out of prison, and he got on the
Wow.
bus and all he had was a brown paper bag. He literally just got released from prison, sat right next to me. So I had situations where it could have gone weird. I could have had a bad trip, but it was able to become, never went there. It was more like
Yeah.
an interesting cosmic experience. But I've certainly have partaken in other psychedelics where I've had very difficult, challenging journeys, and that would be with ayahuasca, which is
Mm.
pretty much a given. Most people who've done ayahuasca journeys can say, yeah, that's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And so that's the only psychedelic compound or concoction that I've partaken where I've been taken to some really difficult and challenging places. But that was, I knew what I was getting into. It wasn't like, oh, let's have some ayahuasca to expand the mind or entertainment purposes. I knew like
Yeah.
I'm going to sit with this plant medicine mindfully and consciously and know that I might be taken to some very difficult trauma rooms or memories. So I knew what I was getting into when I worked with ayahuasca for several years from 2015 to 2018. So yeah,
Okay.
very different experiences there.
So, one of my teachers says you've got tools and you've got toys, and plant medicine is a tool that many people use as a toy. Now, obviously, in later years, your relationship shifts from more recreational to more of a tool. And I'm curious, particularly as you just brought up ayahuasca and the period of time where you really worked with this plant a lot. What was it that called you to that medicine?
So I was first called to work with ayahuasca. I first heard of ayahuasca in the 90s because being part of the rave culture from 90 to 95 as a young person, um, at a lot of different raves and festivals that I had been to, and I traveled around, jumping around to a lot of them over those years. There was always, information booths and whatnot on MDMA, ecstasy, psychedelics, magic mushrooms, and I first learned of Terence McKenna in the 90s at that time. And I felt really drawn to his work, and there was a lot of zines and things that had um, stuff that he had written. So I had become really aware of his work with the mushroom and also with DMT, and I felt very drawn to that side of it. And I first heard of ayahuasca from those channels, and I always thought I would really love to do that, but I knew it was a medicine from the Amazon. So the only way to really do it was to go down there, like those guys did, like the McKenna brothers did. And so I thought, wow, one day I would love to go do that one day. And it was always in the back of my mind of because I love traveling. I've been through all of Central America, backpacking, freight train hopping through Mexico, and, really interested in, the jungles, and have been in the jungles of Central America and all of those things. So I felt like, oh, one day, definitely we'll go there. So I always felt that pull in the 90s. And then it wasn't until the early 2000s, it came back on my radar again because I read a book called Breaking Open the Head by Daniel Pinchbeck. And Daniel was on this sort of quest, a psychedelic quest, trying all these different psychedelics and writing about it in different chapters of his book. And he had a chapter on ayahuasca, and I was like, oh yeah, it brought it back on my radar again. And I was like, yeah, I really need to get down to Central or South America again. This needs to happen. And then, it was like a pipe dream. I know it was going to happen one day. I'll sit with shamans and really move into that kind of work. And then all of a sudden, it came onto my radar in 2015. And it was through a friend who's a filmmaker, artist friend of mine. And I ran into him randomly one day in London, and I was talking to him about my work with lucid dreaming, because I hold workshops and retreats, and I help people connect to lucid dreams, and how lucid dreams are this really interesting zone where it's like hyper vivid, real dream reality. And I was likening it to almost like a natural DMT experience, because they can be so vivid and otherworldly. So we got talking about DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, which is a very highly psychedelic compound. And he got onto the ayahuasca, talking about that, of which DMT is a big part of the ayahuasca brew. And he said, Tree, you really should come to this ayahuasca ceremony. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can afford to get down to South America. And he's like, no, it's here in the UK. I was like, oh, I'm in. Yes. Yeah. So the shamans were starting to come to the UK. So I said, definitely. I've been kind of waiting to do this since the 90s, really. So the rest is history. And I started to work with the plant medicine from that year for over 3 years, several times a year. Whenever the shamans came over, would sit and do the ceremonies with them. And so it just felt really good timing as well, because it was like, I think I was talking to you earlier about how when I turned 40, it was a very pivotal year of moving into service and into this different zone of development. And this would have been, just a few years afterwards, 2015. This was when, 3 years later. So it was all part of, my development over my
Yeah.
40s. And yeah, the rest is history. So it came to me finally in that way, where it was like, oh, it actually came to the UK, which was good. Biggest
Do you?
teacher of my life. I can't, like, there's life before ayahuasca and life after ayahuasca. Like, it is an absolute game changer. I could talk about it for hours, but massive game changer. And it's what really helped guide me into making it a priority to also help people move through those experiences. So I enrolled into the Aleph Trust and their program for psychedelics, altered states, and transpersonal psychology, and I graduated there a few years ago. And now I work in, that's part of my how I guide people and help people in a transpersonal way. Psychedelics are not exactly legal yet here in the UK. They are in certain places in the world. But as it stands, how I'm able to support people as a psychedelic therapist is to help people through the integrative process only at this point. So people
Yeah.
come to me who've had psychedelic experiences and they want the integrative process. And so I'll sit and have sessions with people to help them make sense of their experience, to help find closure in the experiences, and to integrate the lessons that they received in their psychedelic experiences. But I don't at the moment do sittings where I help
Yeah.
sit and facilitate a psychedelic experience because it's not legal yet. But the laws are changing, and we'll see where we're at in 5 years time. But as it stands, that's my role. And I'm very much into psychedelic research too. So my thesis and my dissertations were all revolving around the great benefits of psychedelics in terms of people's, in terms of depression, end of life distress, uh, you know, um, trauma, accessing trauma and integrating trauma. So I think it's great. I'm excited to see where it goes as well. Hopefully we'll be able to create a framework and a structure to be able to support people. Because what I worry about right now at the moment is a lot of people are trying psychedelics, using them, and they're not really in safe containers at the moment. People
Yeah.
are, going to warehouses in East London and Hackney and just sort of like having these intense ayahuasca experiences with people who are shamans or qualified, and some people having like earth-shattering experiences, but then they're not able to process them and they're not able to integrate them afterwards. So it is
Yeah.
important, I guess, to have these boundary dissolving experiences, but it's also really important to be able to know how to piece it all together, integrate it, and bring it into a cohesive and
Yeah.
coherent whole. So that's what we're missing at the moment, I think.
I would love to know whether you recall the first lessons from the first journey for you.
Ha ha ha. Yeah. I went into my first journey in 2015 just with all these expectations, like, because I researched the hell out of ayahuasca and read a lot and listened to other people's experiences. I wanted to know what was going on in the body, what happens to the brain, what happened. I wanted to know all these things, all the right preparations. Like, I was really like, oh, I want to do it right. And I went into it sort of like, I guess, with all these unconscious expectations. And I didn't set an intention as to, well, actually I did. Actually, I did set an intention. I mean, I didn't set an intention like, oh, heal me from these traumas, or I want to, okay. My expectation or intention was like, show me what this is all about. Like, as in the nature of reality, which I think was a big, bold, and kind of
That's a
an
big
arrogant
intention.
ask. Anyway, yeah. And she showed me, and I literally had like this massive ego death. A lot of people, describe ego deaths when they have these boundary dissolving experiences. But what I say she because it is like a feminine, like plant consciousness. It really does feel like a female entity in a way that comes and communes with you and chats. And it's almost like this telepathic communication. But on the onset of all the hallucinations, the visions that were happening, which all started off with lots of different eyes and animal eyes looking at me, and these really interesting eyes kept coming in, and then a big serpent came in and started to surround me. The first thing that she did was I felt like completely an out of body experience. So just completely taken out of my body into this other realm that was I guess like a classic DMT trip, where it was like you're in cartoon land, like literally hyper vivid, hyper real, kaleidoscope of being in an alien world, and literally there. And in amongst these huge, gigantic, undulating strands of DNA. And I'm in them and looking around them and I'm around them. And then I was just like, what is this? Like, it was so untethered from anything that was connected to this material reality and what my little tiny human mind could understand. I couldn't even comprehend really what I was looking at. Because I'm so rudimentary. I'm just like a silly little human creature. And I was so out of my element, but I had asked, that was my intention, take me there. And oh, well, she took me there. So it blew my tiny little mind. But I was so overwhelmed that I was just like, what is it? Where am I? What is this? I was just like, what the? And, and she said to me, don't you get it? And I was like, what? I don't, like, I'm looking at DNA here. I'm in it. And I'm, what is this? And she said, this is what it's all about. You were asking what it was all about. This is it. And I was just looking at it, and it felt like clockwork too. It felt like this DNA was part of this greater clockwork of the universe, of the nature of reality. And it was all moving around like this massive game, like this massive clockwork cartoon game. And she said, don't you get it? It's all a cosmic joke. And she was kind of like, ah, and I was like, oh, I don't like this. And I was like, I don't like that reality is all a cosmic joke. Because I went into it thinking, all like the nature of reality is going to be this amazing, lofty, intellectual, spiritual, like grandiose thing.
Yeah.
And what she's showing me is like, it's all hilarious. And it's all this fun circus joke. It is all fun, 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 kids. And I was like, I don't like that. My ego doesn't like that. I wanted it to be something really lofty and really like intellectual and spiritual. And she was just showing me it was like this like zany game. And it just made me feel so like it was really funny. I was like, I don't like it. And I had this battle with the ego and her all night. It was actually quite cool because she kept teasing me about it to the point where my ego broke down. So when I was like, I don't like this, I don't like how it's a cosmic joke. And I felt almost like my consciousness go like that, just like pull back. And she said, I will never forget. She said, well, I guess the joke's on you then. And it was when she said that I went into this downward spiral. And so what happened as soon as she said that, when she had me up in that realm, the joke's on you then, I was sucked back into my body. And it was so weird because I could see it. I was coming back down into the physical reality, and I could see this insane, like golden, it was like a golden spiral sort of umbilical cord that was coming down attached to my physical body. And it reminded me of like, the, like the Stairway to Heaven, like that there's this William Blake painting that's absolutely stunning. It's like the Stairway to Heaven. And obviously there's the Led Zeppelin song Stairway to Heaven. There's the Jacob's Ladder. There's all these references to this sort of like this port, this way upwards. So it was golden. It was kind of like, it felt, like a really real kind of umbilical cord. And I kind of traveled back through that, and I could see my slumped body. Like I was sitting up in the ayahuasca circle, just sitting up, and I was sort of like my head was slumped down. It was like this weird flesh avatar that was just in some weird holding pattern. And my consciousness came back down into my body. And then I was back into my body after she said, well, I guess the joke's on you. And then I was in my body, have started having this crazy downward spiral of ego death, because she showed me the nature of reality. And then I was fighting it because I had all these expectations, and it was really good. Actually, it was very painful, but it was really good. So then she started to show me all the moments in my life where I've been, stubborn, where I've been digging my heels in and not open-minded, where I've been rigid in my thinking, been critical in my thinking, and tried to make the world a certain way based on my own ego and all this stuff that I wasn't able to see before. I just couldn't, would never been able to access that information or that side of myself. And there I was, shown it from when I was like 3 years old, like all these different times in my life where I've been stubborn about being open-minded and also too serious, man. I was like really serious, like really too self-serious and rigid. And there are times where I've been able to see the cosmic joke, but I needed to see it a lot more. And so I kept going, ego death. And of course, with ayahuasca, you end up like puking your guts out as well, which they call the purge, which is a much nicer, kinder way to say it. But I'm just going to say, you're blowing chunks. Like you are like, and it's like energy. It's not, it's like with each vomit, I'm like, that's my critical nature. This is my control issues. This is my rigidity. This is my self-loathing. And it was all coming out. So my first experience with ayahuasca was literally a disillusion of my ego, which I really needed to have. You need to have these things. And I needed it. So I came out of the experience like this shriveled up husk of a human. I was like, oh my God, like I felt so hollow and I felt so depleted. And I was like, who am I? Whoa. Like I had built this construct of who I thought I was. And it was really good. It was really painful, but really good. It set me up to be able to be much more light, happy, less self-involved, less like believing my own shit. Like, it made me start to see the high humor of the universe, that yes, we are in this really interesting cosmic game, and it's absurd, it's hilarious, but it's loving. Sometimes it's dark. It's all good in the hood. And yeah, that was my first experience with ayahuasca.
I love the way that you have described this so much, because it is not romantic. And at the same time, you're like, it was really good, but here I died here, and I died here, and I died here, and I died here. I have a theory about challenging ayahuasca journeys, and I have done a handful myself. I go back to Peru actually this December, and I will sit with ayahuasca and Tree of Light again. And it's interesting because I did this last year and I was there for 10 days. I did 5 ceremonies, and it was a lot. And what I think, and so I will also give you just a tiny bit of extra context, that I have sat with Bufo before. And so for those people who are listening who don't know what Bufo is, that is the natural form of DMT. They say it's the strongest psychedelic known to man. And when people talk about ego deaths, I'm like, when I did Bufo, I died. I died. I don't feel like my experiences on ayahuasca have been the same level of intensity in terms of me just not knowing who the fuck I am. But what Bufo taught me and what I took into my ayahuasca ceremonies is don't resist. And so when challenging things would present themselves to me during the ayahuasca and the tree of light, I was able, there's a level of consciousness that and I think just generally that you're able to maintain with ayahuasca. Like when you said, you're having a conversation with the grandmother, she's speaking to you and you're responding back. So when I'm having these experiences that feel like they're on the verge of it being really challenging. So I remember at one point all of the sound in the room being turned up. So just sonic hearing. Somebody would whisper something over across the room. I could hear them by the side of me as though they were shouting in my ear. That just from a very physical experience could be really distressing if I started going like, fuck, why is everybody in my head? Like, oh my God, like I needed to stop. Like trying to control the room would have made that an incredibly like just hard experience. But remembering that everything that I resist is going to persist in ayahuasca until I fucking submit was the key to like I remember once like vomiting and then looking and like feeling like the sick was all in my hair, which then turned into like snakes that were all, and I remember feeling like, oh my God, and then just being like, and it's okay and I'm okay. And I feel like that helped me. It was a different I feel like that helped me, and I don't want to use the word bypass, but I don't have a better word right now. Bypass really tough shit. And again, maybe that was just that journey. And maybe when I go, because there's nervousness actually as I go into the next one, that it did feel not easy, isn't the right word, but I felt like there was a conscious way to navigate the challenging pieces. And I feel like that's my conscious brain trying to fool me. But I am curious, in your experience, when you've worked with people with integration, your own personal experience, how much does resistance to what is play a part in how someone will describe ultimately their experience? My feeling is that when you try and hide or run or you're like no, as opposed to show me, it's worse.
Yes, 100% worse if you are resisting. And I use my very first experience with ayahuasca in 2015 as an example. So that was before I started a dedicated meditation practice. So literally in 2015, after the first ayahuasca experience, I started right after that immediately doing Vipassana meditation. So I try to go every year to sit for 10 days in noble silence, 10 hours of meditation every day, doing meditation technique. Because when you're able to sit with yourself in a sense of balance and equanimity and watch your thoughts just arise and pass and be calm, cool, and collected with it, that is very helpful when you go into any type of psychedelic experience, because then you're able to just sit and observe without the resistance, without the aversion, and without trying to, make it stop. So meditation, a really great foundation for life, really, for day-to-day living and living life without attachments, but also very, very good for sitting with any type of psychedelic experience. So for my clients and folks that I guide, in terms of those who've come to me and had integrative sessions, we talk a lot about the resistance. And many people who really struggle in their experiences said, no, I was resisting. Yeah, I was resisting. I was fighting it. I was trying not to vomit. I didn't want to vomit, or I felt like the purge wanted to go, but I was resisting the purge. Or I was shown my pain room and I was in the pain room and it was horrific and I was struggling to get out of there. And so a lot of the times I take them back to those places of the pain room and say, okay, what was going on? Let's try to work on it. And sometimes my sessions do involve meditation and bringing them back there, into a place where they're safe and they're able to express and articulate it and go, actually, it was connected to my relationship with my dad. They weren't able to articulate it because they were fighting it. And so there are ways in which to go back to those places of the deep unconscious, of the psychedelic experience, and retrieve the information again, even after the psychedelic experience. And so part of what I try to do is get my clients to go back and to connect the pieces and to try to release even after the experience. And then I also incorporate an integrative practice through art and creativity. So a lot of the homework I give my clients is to go and paint or draw an image of the experience, but use colors that feel like it goes with the experience. And it's important to do that because it gets it out of the realms of the inner worlds and the unconscious out on a piece of paper or a canvas. Yeah. And you're able to look at it and sit with it. Every day you could add a little bit more to it. It's a very helpful process. And you don't have to be an artist to be able to do that either. But these are just some of the ways I help folks who resist the experience and who've had a harrowing experience to integrate it, and also guide clients who are about to go into their psychedelic sessions of, a good foundation of meditation, being able to observe without getting carried away, without feeding the fears, no matter what's coming at you. If it's like a goblin with like big teeth and it's like enveloping you, and all of a sudden you're remembering how you were bullied when you were 10 years old, just observe it, and it's not going to destroy you. It can be very challenging emotions that arise, but the pain comes from the resistance. As soon as you almost surrender to it, it reaches a frenzy of emotional or energetic intensity, but then it just dissipates. It dissolves and it transforms into something else. But when we keep resisting it, it will just keep coming at us. It keeps coming at us. Yeah. And the reason why it keeps coming at us is because it wants us to transcend it. It wants us to resolve it. Yeah. I do the same thing with dream work with my clients who have recurring nightmares. The recurring nightmare is happening over and over and over because it's trying to get your attention. That's why it keeps poking you. And it's getting your attention through fear. And that was a scary dream. But it is getting your attention to shake you, to look a little bit deeper, to heal something there. The nightmare is happening because there's trauma or there's stress underneath that. So I see psychedelic experiences the same. If something ghastly is coming up, it's to get your attention to release or to integrate. So being in a very calm surrender mode, it's difficult, but if you practice with meditation, it gets easier and easier. And like you did with your experience, you just okay, I just allowed this, and you just observed it, and you observed even the purge too, and you realize what it's all connected to, and you go, you're enlightened from it.
It's very reassuring having had this conversation with you, because like I said, it was like I'd had these thoughts and then my mind's like, yeah, but is that true? Is that true? So it is very reassuring. I don't think that I've heard anybody actually confirm that outside of you. So thank you. I think it's super helpful. The other thing that I would say is I have a lot of people say to me, oh, I've heard everybody talking about ayahuasca, and I'm like, I think I want to do it, and I'm curious about doing it. And for me, it came into my awareness a year before I sat with it. Same with Bufo. So a year of consideration, a year of thinking about, I mean, I went into Bufo with I said, show me all, I think it was something like, show me my fears. Also not a great intention to go into a psychedelic with, because I saw and felt it all. But it was a year of preparation mentally and emotionally. And I would say that for anybody who is curious about it but not sure, I feel like that's not the best foundation to go into work with these tools. I think that you do need to be sure that you're ready to be shown what it is that ultimately you're hiding from, or you're ready to experience, because it's not all pain, it's not all dramatic, it's definitely not all traumatic for everybody. Sometimes there's another level, but I think that readiness is something that you feel innately rather than like, oh, this kind of sounds cool.
Oh yes, definitely, and it's something that's not just taken as a light entertainment at all. It's very difficult and deep work, and like you said, it does require some preparation. And it's very interesting too with this plant medicine as well, because I've talked to many people and have heard so many stories as well from various shamans and whatnot, of people who've sat with the medicine and it didn't do anything for them. It was almost as though the plant just didn't take them
Nope.
there. And I've had a lot of different people tell me that I've drank and then during the night, like four times I went up and had the drink and I just fell asleep. It did nothing. Whereas you'll have one person take one drink from the ceremony and they're out in the realms all night long, and they can't even get up to go up and take another partaking, of the medicine. So there's also the very strange, that is very strange to me, that a deeply psychedelic compound will just like make someone fall asleep and not even have any visions or anything. So what's going on there? And I don't, maybe there needs to be more studies done on that, but I've just literally, there's been a lot of people that I've talked to that have had that. Other people who've, only had a very small amount and they're gone. And also it doesn't seem to be, like I've sat in circle with lots of different types of people, like, big guys who are big muscly guys who seem like they probably need lots of doses to get anywhere. Because you think of maybe like the medicine being a bit like if you have a pint of beer, if I had a pint,
Yeah.
I would get drunk from one pint. Whereas if a big muscle guy had a pint, it might not do anything to them. But with ayahuasca, it's very funny because you'll have a big guy like that just have a tiny little shot and he's gone. Whereas I've seen like elderly women going up and, like 5 times in one night and it not doing a dent on them. And so I just don't know how it works biologically too. And I guess the idea is that the plant, she will take people where they need to go, and you might not even be taken anywhere in your journey, and you just never know what you're going to get. Like my first experience, like I was saying, was just the classic ego death, but then I had other experiences where I was absolutely shocked where I went and what I needed to see. Like she brought me once into my mother's womb, and I was in my prenatal events in the womb, so visceral, so I felt everything that my mother was feeling. I was all the intergenerational trauma like going into me, and and understanding the core of my subconscious and unconscious grief and trauma was actually connected to the state of my mother when I was in her belly. Like it was like mind-blowing stuff that I could never ever access that ever unless I was in a deep psychedelic journey. So, and I wasn't expecting that. I didn't even set intentions around that. I didn't even know I had fundamental issues around my relationship and connection with my own mother, let alone intergenerational stuff. I didn't know any of that. And it was really clearly showed to me in that experience and my birth experience. And I released loads of trauma and grief around that. So, and it changed my life as a result and improved my relationship with my mother and all of this other stuff. So you just never know where she's going to take you. And sometimes she doesn't take you anywhere. So it's very mysterious.
I am interested in why you stopped sitting with, or paused. I don't know whether you would say that you would never sit with it again, but you said 2015 to 2018 you worked with ayahuasca, intensely. When did it feel like, okay, this feels complete for this chapter?
Yeah, so
And
it was
why?
my last sitting. Like I just knew. Like it was like this knowing. She said, and she taught me a lot in those years, and those years that I worked with her from. So there was a lot of healing that was going on, but then she was teaching me too, and I had some really wild, like psychic experiences and very unusual synchronicities and even though I was, a trained death doula, as I was working with ayahuasca, she was my biggest teacher in and around death, without a doubt. So even though I had my training and certification with being a death doula, actually my biggest teacher was ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is considered the vine of the dead, or the souls of the, connected to the souls of the dead. So she was a massive teacher around death. And it felt like my final sitting with the medicine, I just knew she was just like, yeah, you're ready to go and, go and do all this homework, because she gives you homework. Go and do the homework that you've been doing. And I remember that particular ceremony. In that particular ceremony, I was able to sit up. I was sitting upright like the entire ceremony. Mostly in previous ceremonies, I'm laid out on my back, and the shaman really encourages you, if you're going to lay on your back, stay on your back. Don't curl up in fetal position on your side, because that blocks the energy.
Yeah.
You really want to keep it. So, a lot of the times I was just like flat on my back, just, doing the work. But for this particular last ceremony, I was able to sit the entire time for 8 hours sitting. And uh, in that particular journey, she was teaching me. And she was teaching me so much about different people in the circle. And she was showing me people's traumas. So it got really interesting in that ceremony. It was very psychic. There was a big psychic connection with others. In the morning, I caught up with a lot of the people, and everything I was shown was spot on to what she was showing me.
Wow.
And she was helping me send energy and help and care to others in the circle. So I felt like I spent a lot of the time in that particular ceremony, like helping people. She's showing me how to send energy to people. Also within my ayahuasca experiences, she unlocked like a language within me, which is known as a phenomenon called glossolalia, which is the ability, it's like you're speaking in another language, but this language is kind of like not known to anyone. And a lot of people say, well, it's just gibberish and it's weird. But when you're under the influence of a plant medicine and you're speaking this language, it's almost like a cosmic language from some kind of other dimension or within yourself. You feel and see the energy. It's strong, it's powerful. And so, that was part of the experience too. And also there was all this other interesting, like remote viewing and things that I could see from people I know are all around the world. And I matched up connections afterwards that were accurate. So that last session was really like, she was showing me how to hold space for other people. And what helped confirm it too, because I felt like she said, you are done your ayahuasca school. It was afterwards, the next morning, the shaman came up to me and he said, thank you so much for helping to hold space last night. And I know what you were doing, and thank you for helping with the work. And it really hit me, because I was like, oh my God, he could see that and he could feel it. And I felt like, oh wow, she's really initiated me into service now. And I felt like that was it. And when I mean by service, I don't mean like I'm going to go out and serve ayahuasca to people. Like, not at all. No, like that's not my culture, and that's not what I'm meant to do. But she was just showing me, like, in my own way, like how to help those people who come into my life, and how to hold space for them on the journey towards death, how to hold space for them in their, in their confusion or their life path, and, all that kind of stuff. So I just knew, I felt like that was my final class with the grandmother. And I just felt like now it's time to go out and do the service, also do all the homework she showed me that I was meant to do. And there's other ways that I need to kind of go deeper. Like I do the Vipassana meditation. So I do feel sometimes, I feel called to go and sit for 10 days and do the work that way. I do dream work, like that. Those are the zones that I work in as well. So yeah, I guess I graduated. I don't know. Do I get a certificate?
You graduated.
Like, I don't know.
That's the word. Are you ever tempted to do a dark retreat?
Yes, I wanted to do one back in 2019. I was looking into it because, after the graduation of ayahuasca, I was still carrying on Vipassana every year, but I was like, I felt, yes. So I started looking into them, and I found ones in Guatemala and different places. And I also had a friend who says, I do have a friend who does one in Wales. We could put you in there for a weekend. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then the pandemic happened. So I want to get back onto that. This is so funny you say this, Susie, because like in the last 2 weeks, people keep saying, have you ever heard of dark retreats? I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm meant to go back to that because of the synchronicities of it. But I'll tell you a really cool story. In 2019, a person who follows me on Instagram said, I'm going into a dark retreat. This was in Germany. And I said, that's so cool. Like for a whole week. And I said, could we do this experiment? Are you up for an experiment? And he's like, yeah, sure. And this is not someone I know really well. Like I don't know anything about their life apart from that they're a yoga teacher. And so he went into his dark retreat, and I said, okay, I'm going to keep a journal for the week that you're in there. And I'm going to set intentions in my dream work as well as my meditations to connect with you. Because I really want to know, do we have a greater chance of connecting to non-ordinary states of consciousness and other people when we're in these really like sensory deprivation, sort of mindful zones. So he went into his dark retreat with a little USB recording device to record his journals, his experiences. He put a black gaffer tape over the blue light so it wouldn't like distract. Okay. And I kept a journal, and I kept dream work. I set intentions around connecting to him. And it was cool because I'd write down things. I had a vision of his father coming to visit him. I don't know about what his family life is. And I had some lucid dreams with him, involved different symbols and whatnot. And so when he got released, I sent him all of my my voice notes and also my experiences of what I saw. And he sent me mine. His. And loads of things matched up, like 15 different things matched up, including, like, I didn't know, but his father had died, and his father came to him in a vision in the dark room. And I had picked up on that as well from what I sensed. We also had mutual dreams that occurred. He also, I meditate in the bath sometimes. And I was once in the bath meditating, and I really felt his consciousness. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. And I'm naked in the bath. And he sent a message going, he's like, Tree, I had this vision of you naked in the bath when I was meditating. And we were totally laughing because he actually remote viewed, and he was able to see that. And so we were just totally laughing at this, this cool experiment. I mean, it was something to do, and there's something with the power of the dark room retreat that also helps people start to dream awake, and it helps to, there's the idea that you start to have an endogenous DMT experience. And what I mean by endogenous is that it's like naturally occurring within our own bodies. So if we are in the right darkness, the right setting, we're able to start to actually have almost like holograms appear before us, or waking dreams that are similar to a DMT experience that are happening within the context of the darkness. And so, Susie, there's so much cool stuff. Have you done it? Have you done the dark room?
No, I haven't. But I looked at that place in Wales. I'm assuming that there's only one place in Wales.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what period it was because I haven't thought about it for the last year or so. But I saw Aubrey Marcus. It was seeing him and his experiment that he did on a dark retreat that made me think, I would really, really like to do that. I think it's unlikely that I will go back immediately to Peru next year. So maybe I switch my Peru plant medicine experience for a week in Wales. I'm very available for it. I'm available.
Oh, wow. I mean, go for it. I mean, the reason why I love it so much too, Susie, is the fact that the long history of people who connect to the mystics, the seers, the
Yeah.
sages, the gurus, like they have all spent time in a cave. You know, that this is all part of
Mm,
these almost initiation practices, even in shamanism, of spending time in the cave, so to speak. There's something about that is important. It is about being and sitting in the darkness, and to be in the now moment, to know thyself, to go into
mm,
these zones is so important, to get out of the busyness, the craziness, the hyper vividness of our reality, and go into these zones. It's part of an initiation. I really feel like even in the Eleusinian mystery cults of ancient Greece, they all involve going into caves, sometimes drinking psychedelic things, like the kukion, which was a
yeah.
psychedelic sort of brew that people would consume. And in these initiations in ancient Greece, the motto was, if you die before you die, then you won't die when you die, which indicates,
Sure.
you need to have an ego death in order to be able
Yeah.
to accept your own biological death.
Yeah.
And understanding that no matter what you go through in a psychedelic experience, your consciousness is still there and it's still existing. So it gives you the sense
Yes.
of there's something about your experience that's beyond the ego, that you can
Yeah.
carry on in a different sort of way, beyond the ego and the biological construct of this flesh suit that we're in. But there always has been a cave. Like, or there's always been a dark place for us to go, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The question in my mind that I imagine some people asking after listening to this, because as I say, I love it because I don't feel like we've romanticized it, is why. And I think that the answer, which has also been shared, is it's to get to know thyself and know this world, and it's move beyond the illusion of self and move beyond the illusion of the 3D and
Yeah.
access truth. Well, that's why I'm doing it. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
desire, really.
I think it's cool and important to know, like, that this need to have a different vantage point or a boundary dissolving feeling. It's not woo woo. It is not in the realms of mysticism. Really, there is science behind this, because I think some people get dissuaded from this kind of thing because they think, oh, that's just airy fairy woo woo shit, and it
Yeah.
actually isn't, because what's happening neurologically is a true hard science fact. When you take psychedelics or even get into states of deep meditation or the dark room experience, something neurologically changes. Your brain
Yes.
waves move from a chattering
Yes.
beta brainwave of the chattering mind and the anxious mind into a different brainwave that is a flow state, which helps you have different vantage
Yeah.
points of view. And also, when you're having a psychedelic experience, what happens in the mind, in the brain, is that the default mode network, which is responsible for the overthinking and the chatter, it shuts down. And it shuts down,
It's
and you're
bypassed.
able to perceive from a different vantage point. And that is science. So when you're able to perceive from a different vantage point, you realize, like, why am I so hung up on all of these little things? And why do I have these thought patterns and these beliefs? That is so weird that I think that way. So there's science behind this. So anyone listening, if you feel like, oh, this isn't for me, it's some hippie, weird counterculture, woo-woo, mystical, new age bullshit. It's like, no, actually, there's science. And so, there's science behind it. And, you can find yourself in these places when you meditate, if you have the guts to go into a dark room and sit with yourself, if you want to do a psychedelic experience, but even not a crazy psychedelic experience full on, even if you microdose, if you take psychedelics in small microdose portions, you can still have this neurological effect where your mind and your thinking patterns and your vantage points shift into something that's different. And studies have been shown in even microdosing, it rewires our, the neurological pathways, and it helps us think in more expansive ways.
Oh, I love this conversation so much. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom. It has been exquisite. With great sadness, I'm going to bring this conversation to a close with some questions that I ask all of my incredible guests. So, quick fire. What does infinite receiving mean to you?
That's a good question. Sorry. Infinite receiving. Infinite receiving is relinquishing control. We all have an unconscious part of us that wants to control everything, and it's about pulling away from the reins of control and letting go. That's easier said than done, but it takes some mindful and conscious work to do that. And I think one good starting point is, as you go through your day, find yourself when you find yourself feeling aversion. Usually when there's aversion to something and you go, no, sometimes we go, no, I don't want to. And even if it's over something really simple, like your partner says, you want some green beans? You go, no. Relinquish control, try the green beans. Unless you're allergic to them, of course, don't try them. But that is a good starting point in the day-to-day. Catch yourself when you say no, or you're not open to an experience, and you find yourself micro-controlling something, and ask yourself, why am I trying to control that right now? Why am I not open to that right now? Why do I have aversion? Why am I digging my heels in? Why am I going, no? And the reason why I'm saying this, infinite receiving, because it's kind of like what I learned from my first ayahuasca experience, when she showed me 100%. How it all worked. And it's like joy and a cosmic joke. And I'm like, no, I don't want it to be that way. I want it to be all these other ways of which I thought was supposed to be. I was being too controlling. And so what I learned from that was just to to be open. So maybe that's a really good way to start to notice, when we have little control issues. Stop yourself when you say no. If you say no, ask yourself, why am I saying no? There's usually a reason. And if it's not a good enough reason, like, oh, well, that will hurt me, or I don't want to damage my body, or I don't want to hurt myself, then ask yourself, well, why are you not being open to this? So infinite receiving starts when we relinquish control.
As you were speaking, you reminded me that I've heard this pretty much at every ceremony I've sat at. The ceremony is, when you finished, the ceremony begins. Life is the ceremony. And the mirror, as soon as you were like, no, I was like thinking of all of the places that I'm resisting. I write about this in the bloody book. All of the places that I'm resisting, I'm still receiving. God, if I could be more conscious about it, the way that I create then is so much more exquisite, So yes, I love this response. Are you good at it?
Am I good at it? I hope I'm getting better at it. I think I'm getting better at it. I think we hold ourselves back from joy in an unconscious way. So in those little moments every day where you go, no, I don't want to do that, you're making yourself miserable sometimes on an unconscious level. So when we start to rewrite that script and also try to get to the root of why we're saying no, sometimes it's something that it's from, childhood, or it's from a fear. And once we transcend and move beyond those root little dialogues that we have within us, then we open ourselves up to infinite freedom and joy. Infinite receiving can come, then we end up feeling like, oh, we're receiving more happiness, abundance, opportunities, magic. It's the universe is like a cause and effect feedback loop. And there's science behind that. Every cause, there's an effect. If I was to go kick my partner in the shins right now, there's going to be an effect. His effect will be like, why'd you do that? Hurt, and I'm going to feel bad for it. And that's the cause and effect. And the universe rolls that way. The law of contagion. What goes out, you receive. So when you are open to infinite receiving, you're given something great out too. So it's not all me, I want to receive. It's like, what are you putting out as well? Are you putting out joy, laughter, positivity, inspiration, service, helpfulness? And then that's going to come back to you. So these great laws of cause and effect, law of contagion is part of the loop. Get into the loop, yo. This is the great fun of the cosmic universe we're in, right?
Where or who in your life could you allow to love you just a little bit more right now?
Who could love me a little bit more right now?
Yeah, who could you let love you more?
Well, it's got to be myself. I know that sounds so self-help and like kind of pathetic, but it always has to start with yourself, and that's not saying it in an egotistical or vain way, like, oh, I love myself so much. But we can't be of any service to anyone else if we're coming from a place of self-loathing or self-critical, or, we don't like ourselves very much. And going back to, the ancient motto of know thyself, which is found in all traditions of the mystery traditions, mystical traditions, spiritual pathways, you can only really start with yourself. So I guess it's like, being more self-compassionate, loving yourself more. I guess it would always start there. And so I feel like that's where I would personally need to start. That would improve my relationships. That would improve my guidance for my clients. It's all got to start there, really. And so thanks for the tip. I'm going to do some nice, conscious, passionate things for myself today. I've been taught that in lucid dreams all the time. It all starts there. Thank you, Susie.
What is your greatest attribute?
I guess I would have to, and this is not coming from myself, this is coming from my partner. I've been with my partner for almost 30 years. So he likes to, we give each other feedback in our relationship. And he says it's like my sense of humor. It's the childlike playfulness of not taking things too seriously. And there's just also a magical wonderment, in the day-to-day, waking up every day and, okay, it's a new day. Like, what can we create? It's creativity. I think I will probably answer that question just from what my partner seems to be able to recognize in me. And I've been able to, accept that as an attribute that's probably a good thing, and to just keep shining out the inner child. I think that's important.
I just want to say, yeah, you got the joke. Do you know what? There's one other thing that I want to say, because you said earlier on when you did your test, you got interior designer, clown, or spiritual leader. And I'm looking at your backdrop and I'm like, where you're sat right now looks lush. Like, it is amazing. Two, when I was checking out your Instagram a couple of weeks ago, I saw you riding what looked like an old merry-go-round horse with your psychedelic, there was psychedelic glasses, this crazy background, you and a friend woo, woo, woo. And I thought, she looks really fun. And then, I get why you wouldn't call yourself a spiritual leader, but so much of what you do is rooted in spirit, and it's the mix of science and spirit that I love. So as we almost close, I've got 2 more questions for you, but as we almost close out, I'm like, I think that this test was not so wrong, you know.
I know what you mean, Susie. It is kind of funny. It is quite funny. Yeah.
I think it was there. I just had to say that. 5. What are you consciously manifesting? Consciously working on manifesting right now?
Well, I think I'm consciously manifesting another book at the moment.
Yeah.
That's where my consciousness has been going at the moment. I've been writing sample chapters, and let's see what happens. I've been putting my mind towards that. And you know how it is as a writer yourself. You kind of get in the zone and you're like, let's do this. And I don't know which one will be the book, because there's 2 of them and I don't know which one will come out, but I'm not really open to whatever is the one that happens. And I don't try to put too much attachment to it. I'm just like, well, whatever clicks and whatever flows, then that's the one that flows. You know, I try to keep it really open. If the timing is right, if it's not right, that's all right. I'll continue doing creative things, but I feel like the zone of creativity is where I really am at right now. Just creativity and
Beautiful.
Writing books. Let's see.
Beautiful. Final question. Where can you allow yourself to be supported more in your life right now?
I think I could be more supported with my bereavement process right now in my life. I've had a lot of deaths this year, lots of them. My sister died, my cousin died, and an uncle died, and 3 friends died. So that's like 6 people. And I've facilitated the funerals for several of them as well. So a lot's been going on, and although I can navigate the process of loss and grief, it is a challenge, you know. So I think it's important when you're going through bereavement to have the extra support, and I feel like that is the zone in which I need to be mindful of right now. Realize that, you know, even though I'm very busy and doing lots of things, there's still loads of grief and waves of grief, tsunamis of it, really, to surf and to navigate. So I need to remember that there's collective support there for grief as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. And there's a lot of loss to experience in a short period of time. So I just want to acknowledge you and send you so much love.
Thank you. Yeah. Big teachers.
Welcome.
Death, big teacher.
This has been just such a masterpiece of a conversation. I am not allowed to have favorites, but if I had a favorite, this would definitely be up there. So thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. And I'm sorry I talk so much. I do get onto, tangents, but we should hang out in real life sometime, because we're both living in Kent. So hey, when the timing aligns, yes.
For sure. Can you let everybody know where they can find you?
You can find me on Instagram's kind of the main hub these days. I tried all the other ones, like TikTok, but I don't know. I can't seem to get with it. Maybe I don't have enough goofy videos or something, but I'd say Instagram, and my handle is literally my name, Tree_Carr, and my website as well, which is all linked in there.
Amazing. If you have got as much out of this episode as I have, please tag Tree, tag me on the gram. Share this with a friend. I would really deeply appreciate it. There's just so much gold and wisdom in here that I would love for as many people to hear as possible. And in the meantime, please remember that it's faith plus action that equals miracles. Thank you for listening to Infinite Receiving with me, Susie Ashworth. I'd love to share with you my Infinite Receiving activation audio. Go to susieashworth.com/activate infinite receiving.